So I've been doing investigations for 20 years. I've been to every training course you can ever imagine about root cause analysis. I have coached, mentored, closed probably 200 or 300 Kappas. I can tell you good news. My quote is, when I show my Kappa to an auditor, they usually go, wow, that's a really good investigation. And that they usually get a nice fluffy feeling and the audit goes pretty well. When I've had to explain somebody else's work, those are usually when I have the problems. So that's just to give you a little background on me. I take investigations a little uniquely. I'm going to talk about the unique tools, but I actually build some of my own sauce, I guess you want to call it, secret sauce, into my Kappa forms that takes the average user. They don't know they're doing Kappa investigations. They don't know they're using a tool. And so that's just kind of how I've done that. So today we're just going to go over investigations, root cause. There's 53 slides. I don't expect to get through them all because you guys have probably used them. If we get through over half of them, I'll be thrilled to death, and I'll send the deck out for everybody.
We have a request that you put it in presentation mode if you know how.
I do. I just usually don't like presentation mode. Okay, that's a Nellieism. I'll use it, but I'm quirky on presentation mode.
Appreciated. I'm sure the audience is applauding silently.
Okay. So the first thing and actually I have a cap I'm doing right now, and literally the first thing they did is panic. They've run out, they've fixed all the symptoms, and it's like, stop, breathe, and investigate. Be the detective is really what I try to tell people. Have the kickoff meeting and start talking about the problem holistically, because the knee-jerk thing is to go right where the problem occurred, and usually that's not where root cause is. That's not usually what the problem is. So stop, breathe, and investigate. We're going to talk about defining the problem. That is the most important step in a root cause analysis, in my opinion. Understanding how and why the deviation occurred, the circumstances, the risk of the nonconformance. If there's other products, processes, or individuals that were involved. This is an area that a lot of people miss in investigations because they'll get so stuck on fixing it, they don't look and see the impact, and they might create another nonconformance down the road. Gather data to aid in the root cause consideration. Data, data, data. Be the detective. Clearly define the problem. The problem helps focus the team and keep the investigation on track. Throughout the Kappa process, I actually copy every form, copies the problem on every page. And the reason I've done that is, and you're going to hear me talk about Kappa because to me, root cause and Kappa are synonymous, is the one thing I learned very early on. Yeah, for me, they are. Because if you're doing an investigation, if it's worth doing an investigation, it's worth putting in a Kappa. If you don't, then an auditor is going to ask you, why didn't you put it in Kappa?
Remind the folks at home, Kappa stands for?
Corrective and preventive action, okay, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Kappas are not bad. Most people are afraid of them.
Well, I'm thinking that for you to have to make a Kappa means because you made a boo-boo.
No, that's not always. There could be the potential of a boo-boo, and it's not really, sometimes it's better to have a Kappa for the potential of a problem than it is because you're reacting to a problem. So yeah.
Preventative versus.
Yeah. And one of the things I've noticed is just because of the nature of Kappas, and they drift. Investigations drift, the actions drift. And so by having that problem statement on every single form and along the whole process, it's how we calibrate. And it's like during a team meeting, okay, remember, here's what the problem was. And so that makes sure you're just continuing in the right direction. And there's nothing worse than getting to the end of a Kappa doing verification, and the question goes, did you address the original problem? And the answer is no, I forgot about the problem. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen. Clearly defining the problem. One of the things I find is everybody thinks they have to pack everything, the kitchen sink, into the suitcase of the problem. And that really isn't the best source. You want to boil the problem down to its most simple nature of what is it, who, what, when, and where. You want to keep it short. You want to keep it concise. The challenge is everybody wants to, like I said, pack everything in. It's not what you think is wrong. That's another thing I see people do is they'll go, oh, I think the problem is this, instead of saying we shipped the wrong device to somebody, or we passed a non-conforming product, or we have a mixed lot. They'll go and give you what they think is wrong versus what the actual facts are. A good problem statement has the source of the information, the detail, the evidence of the problem. Was nonconformance contained? Was the records generated during the nonconformance? Those are what a good problem statement has. We don't want opinions in our problem statement. Here's a good tool for doing it. who was involved, what was, were they trained? Was it a supplier? What was discovered? Was there a change? And this is something people forget a lot of times when they're building their initial investigation is what changed in the process. And so sometimes that's a fact that you want to include in your problem statement. What test method changed? What software application changed?
Is there something of a standard form?
Everybody,
or does every person make their own?
Every Kappa person has their own. I have developed mine. I've been using my Kappa form for probably about 12 years. I absolutely love it. I won't use anybody else's. But I have seen, and it's only because I know that I'm not forgetting anything along the way. Some people want a really high level 20,000 step Kappa because they think it makes life easier, then they forget things. And some like it really detailed. I'm very detailed in everything I want. When did the event occur? Because sometimes that timing of when can be a delineation and an indication when you're doing your investigation that there was a change that occurred that you didn't consider as part of your investigation that caused the problem. When was training conducted last? Sometimes that's important because maybe you guys did a training that wasn't released. It was an on-the-job training. We had a new employee. They never got the training. That's something to consider. And then how was the deviation discovered? That sometimes can be the most important because what happens is a lot of people will narrow in on the problem statement to only the how it was discovered and where it and at that point. And sometimes that's not enough detail. Evidence of the problems. This right here, live interviews, is probably the most important thing in my tool bag. And absolutely, auditors have loved it. During my interview process, here's what I found. They go, and I've actually had FDA auditors go, do you know how many people don't document the interview or don't do the interview? And so that really is very valuable. Doing the process review, everybody kind of does that, but it's just a reminder. And the thing that a lot of people don't go looking at is the record review, the training record, the quality record, the DHR, the DCO. They don't dive down to that detail when they're doing kind of the evidence and the problem defining so that they can get a really good problem description.
You have to hand in your Kappa to somebody?
Yes. I actually usually I actually kind of don't tell people they're handing my Kappa into them. I tell them I'm your Kappa mentor. You're going to draft it and I'm going to polish it and ask you some questions to make sure you get it accurate.
And when it's done, you send it to whom?
Oh, me. I'm it.
Oh, okay. It's not like you have a submission to FDA with your Kappa.
No, it's not like a complaint where you would do an MDR. A Kappa is a process that's internal. It's owned internally. It just gets recorded and closed out internally.
Okay. How many pages is a typical Kappa?
Well, I have 5 forms. I have an initiation, a detailed investigation, implementation, verification, and an extension form. Each one of those is 2 pages each, and they're done at different phases. So that's 10. And then any evidence you have, I've seen a Kappa be 20 pages and I've seen a Kappa be 100 with all the attachments, depending on how much work there is.
It doesn't sound as intimidating as I thought it would be.
The only reason it's intimidating is the Kappa word. If I could change the word Kappa to something else that was fluffy, I feel like I've actually had people come up to me and say, hey, when I started this, I thought your forms were too complicated. I was scared. I didn't want to do it. She goes, now that I've done it, she goes, I'm ready for another one. It was a lot easier than I expected it to be. And I am going to watch the time. So here's some good problem statements. The roof above the kitchen leaked during the last storm. It's kind of really good. I like to when I give training, I like to give it to as if like a home experience, because a lot of people can relate to a home experience, right? Another good problem statement, a diagnostic device was shipped to the wrong customer A and customer A used 2 devices. Customer B did not receive a device. A nice problem statement. It gives us something. Now, interestingly enough, this is a case I've been working on, and they're focused on the service part. And then I said, well, during my last internal audit, when I went to the shipping area was doing shipping from their desk and they were doing batching. And they're like, oh, they didn't even consider it as an interview point. I said, you should interview the shipping area because that could be part of your investigation. So that's why this problem statement's good. Device failed to power up when, oh shoot, I forgot to finish that sentence stage. when the customer opened the box. Okay, can you make notes to correct that?
Kevin notes, if you are a component ingredient supplier, you usually have to provide your Kappa, or at least a summary, to customers.
If you're a service supplier, if you're a supplier and they just issued a Kappa request or a SCAR, yes, you provide it to your customer.
I invited Maren on because she does quality, as you know. I'm wondering how how do you approach them? Do you have your own template? And we cannot hear her. And I invited Karen Deep on to do the same. He has yet to accept my invitation to be on. Does anyone else do their own Kappas?
Right, can you hear me now?
Yes, thanks. Do you have your own form for Kappas?
Yes, I have one that I like using, and then I've also used several different forms with customers and modified them.
Do you, gals, think that it would be better to have an industry standard one? Do you think we as an industry would be better off if, I mean, is there a governing body of Kappas?
The problem is, I want to say no. And the reason I say no, because you've got a range of companies, small, medium, large. You've got paper system versus electronic system. I mean, the Kappa requirements are there. How you build them into your form or your procedures, your work instructions should be up to you.
I would agree with that. Yeah. The fields or the information that you need to cover is pretty clearly spelled out in the regulations for the medical. And so if you look at Kappa forms, they will all have very similar characteristics. And that's true not only for medical, but for non-medical, if you're doing Kappa for a non-medical company.
Jan writes, RACL charts help people write better Kappas. And then she writes for packaging. Thoughts? Is that something familiar to you? I don't recognize the acronym.
I usually only RACI charts for my projects. I don't usually bring them into my Kappas. It's not something I've considered. Maybe a large Kappa.
There's so many different tools that can be used. I think the idea that you have to have a really good problem statement is so fundamental to getting the Kappa right. If you get a bad problem statement, then it's hard to analyze it. So fundamental of good Kappa is making sure you have a clear problem statement. So this is great.
Yeah, and just to kind of give you guys a tool. So one of the things I find is breaking up the problem statement is here's the what I call the simple problem statement. Like, here's the facts, Jack, in one liner. It's like, here's the headline, right? 1 or 2 sentences. And then here's the background. So what I do is I split them up because what happens is, remember I talked about that suitcase. Everybody wants to pack everything into the problem description, and then you can't read the problem description and understand it. Instead, what I'll do is I go, here, give me the facts here, or give me the, the high level, and then pack it down here. And then by doing that, they don't realize they're developing a good problem scenario altogether.
As a communications guy, I don't typically like forms, but this I like because it's very clear and it's like, I understand what you said.
Well, and the other thing is, I've been doing high performance documentation for 20 years. I started with Abbott. Is the one thing that people do is they will build a form and one field will do 5 things. I don't. A field does one thing, and then I describe what that one thing is. And if it doesn't do one thing, I split it, because the human brain can process one thing at a time when they're doing a form.
Verna gives you a thumbs up as well. I want to close out Jan's comment. Did you have something to add, Jan, about RACI forms?
Oh, I was just saying, what I have seen, and like Nellie was saying, I've been in places where they have more than one thing necessary on a line. So you have to write a story in the particular place. And that's where we found the RACI charts came in, because we had too many people trying to edit language rather than concentrating on what was necessary to actually put into the RACI, so you could have your problem statement and figure out what actually caused it and what you can do about it.
What's that acronym? I thought the I was an L, so clearly I don't know.
I can't remember. Nellie, do you remember what RACI stands for?
I wrote it down somewhere. Paige, can you go to our OneNote and do a search? Because somebody asked me about.
I know there's so many acronyms we use, and I can't remember that one right offhand.
So responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed is usually what I use for RACI.
Oh, okay, but those are for the people. We were using it to actually say what you had to have information in that area and who might be responsible for it. Yes, so we got some of that in there, but just trying to get them to say exactly what was wrong. And yes, that's always been a problem with Kappas. And I've done so many packaging ones. I can't believe it. And most people get so upset when I finish up with what a Kappa actually happened. And usually it's training.
I have a whole nother slide on the different, corrective and preventive actions, to be honest with you, because this slide deck along with Kappa, and I had to do because there were so many people who had never done a Kappa, and they don't understand the difference between containment, correction, corrective action, preventive action. They didn't understand it. And so, yes, I understand. So if you ever need a slide deck, Tim, I got one.
That'd be good.
Do you teach this?
Huh?
Verna, do you teach this?
Yes. So I use, rather than necessarily focused on Kappa, I mean, this is basically the way that you go through the process, no matter what company you're in. So it's all, fundamental, especially this problem statement. If you go out there and look at, say, other people that are teaching just root cause analysis, not Kappa, there's templates that all line up exactly the way Nellie has it. Make sure you have
where you teach.
Santa Clara University.
And what's the name of your course?
Root cause analysis.
I heard it was a gut course.
A what course?
Gut?
Gut?
You know what that means?
No.
Oh, that's what they say, a course that you just take to get an easy A.
Oh.
No, Verna would never give an easy A.
No, I mean, no. Yeah.
You're a tough grade. Okay.
All right, so
in San Diego with us, I'm happy to say.
No.
I'm gonna transition from problem statements into the actual root cause analysis. So we're gonna talk about a couple tools. There are so many tools, and there's no wrong tool, but there's the best use of tools is what I like to think about it, right? Review and verify every factor problem. So one of those things, you have to have somebody who's inquisitive. You actually need what I call the lead investigator. Because if you don't have one person leading it and coaching and analyzing and verifying everything, then what you'll struggle with is you'll have a bunch of leaders, and you can't have too many chiefs in one room on a Kappa. We're going to talk about my general investigation table. This is the one I use with people who've never, actually, it's in my form. Everybody uses it, they just don't realize what it's connected to, because it leverages the 5 whys, cause and effect. And then here's some other ones that you can use, and I'll be kind and send this out to everybody. I'm not a greedy person, so you guys can use this and share it with everybody, or you can just replace your own form. This is probably going to be like, oh my God, this looks familiar, manpower, machine, materials, measurement, environment, method, process, other. This is where they can do that fishbone, or they can do the 5 whys. But what I'm doing is I'm guiding them through the process of, I'm thinking about manpower. Okay, manpower is training, qualified employees, doing the right thing. Then it's machines, what equipment and tools we use. So they actually go in here and do questions. And sometimes it's an if-then question. Sometimes it's a 5 whys question. And sometimes it's just a diarrhea dump of everything that they found in that area, and we organize it. It's about, and it's, I usually get more than I want, but yet it's all good information to filter through. These are just snapshots in my form. There's other pieces in my form that I use, but yeah. And so this is my favorite method of taking any non-Kappa, non-investigator. I actually had a purchasing person go through this Kappa process using this section. The 5 whys. I love the 5 whys, because the 5 whys just keep asking why until you can't answer it anymore, and then that's your root cause. It works very effective when you've had we have somebody who doesn't have any experience.
Two-year-olds, and also 2-year-olds love this. 2-year-olds love
Why?
You'll note that I added a man to this panel. I was struck on how, as a conference producer, I always try to make sure there's at least as many women on panels as I can. It's very easy to find white guys to speak. It's very difficult for me to find enough gals who are ready to, participate or that I'm able to get to speak. And I was struck how every one of you was female. I wonder, is there something about the division of labor that?
No, I think the challenge, I hate to bring out my mom instincts, but moms never trust anything. They always dig deeper. And so I really feel like it's that mothering instinct, but that's me. That's my perception of it. Because, that's just who it's my nature. My nature is to keep asking and driving you crazy until I get down to the bottom of it. All right, let's keep going. here's some 5 whys. This is an example. Why is there a high reject of widgets? Because the plastic stain. Why is the plastic stain? Because there's excess oil in the cutting machine. Why is there excess oil in the cutting machine? Because it's clogging, as it's been months since it was clean. Why is it so long since it's clean? Because we only service the machine when it breaks down, not a preventive basis. And then why do we only service after breakdowns? Because maintenance says it's cheaper. So this one right here is that kind of, okay, we've gotten to the point. This is an actual Kappa that I had. It's like they didn't have a preventive maintenance is what we end up with root cause on. This last one was just like kind of an excuse. So just a real live example of 5 whys.
I'm thinking the 6th why is, why don't you leave me alone?
Yeah.
Right.
Nellie, go away. That's usually what I get. How it helps. It identifies the underlying root cause. You know, it's like if you go back to this one right here, we started with stained plastics. What the human nature is to do, they would have stopped the excess oil, analyzed how we could replace the oil, how we could, I mean, there would have been a whole focus on that oil. But by keep going down, we realized we've actually got down to some maintenance. So that's where that's how you want to get efficient at your Kappa investigations. How it helps, it analyzes the root cause. It helps scope the corrective action to eliminate the root cause. Sometimes with the 5 whys, you'll find causes or symptoms that you can correct along the way, as well as the corrective action, making it more of an investigation. It helps avoid the superficial symptom. Remember, I just talked about the excess oil. That was a superficial symptom, but you could have gotten focused on it. It should be simple and quick alternative to cause and effect analysis. The other thing is it's called 5 whys, but you can ask less or more questions. If you get to root cause, it doesn't matter. I actually had an engineer goes, I only asked 3 questions. I need 2 more. He's just racking his brain. I'm like, you've got root cause, you're done. All right, sorry, that was funny. Here's another example. Why did the machine stop? It blew a fuse. Why did the fuse blow? The fuse was the wrong size. Why was the wrong size? The engineer put it there. Why did the engineer do that? The supply room issued the wrong fuse. Why? The stock bin was mislabeled. Again, we could have gotten, average human nature would be to blame the engineer for pulling the wrong part. This is probably my favorite investigation tool, besides the interview process. Cause and effect is not my favorite tool, not gonna lie to you. We all have our loves, but it really is good at identifying inputs and the outputs of a problem and narrowing down the root cause that needs to be addressed. Cause and effect, focus on the causes, not the symptoms. And so remember, I keep talking about that symptom issue. It's so easy as a human nature to focus on the symptom. Hey, somebody's bleeding. Well, guess what? Their leg was cut off, so they're hemorrhaging. Let's do a tourniquet, right? That kind of thing, capturing the collective knowledge of the experience. This really gets in cause and effect. You want to pull a group in. 5 whys, you can usually do one-on-one with somebody, but with the cause and effect, you want the group thing, the brainstorming piece of that. Provide pictures of why an effect is happening. Visuals are very effective during this investigation tool. It helps for this cause and effect helps further data gathering and identifying areas that need to tackle, and it's positive effect, generating a positive effect. Fishbone issue diagrams, they're beautiful. They're easy to break down. I can tell you the non-investigator, when they see them, their brain shuts down. It's been my experience. And so that's why I did the tables versus the fishbone. But it gives a visual of the issue. It shows a relationship between the causes. It's carried out by a group of individuals who have experience and knowledge of the process. So that's another key. If you're doing an investigation, you want people who are knowledgeable in the areas touching the nonconformance, because you'll never know where that root cause is going to come from. And so you want to make sure all the players that interact with that process are there for that investigation. Brainstorming potential causes. This is not something I normally like to do because the human nature jumps to brainstorming potential causes, and sometimes we can get too focused on it, but it is the first part of the process when you're starting the cause and effect diagram. Provide structure to understand the relationships, individuals with framework for planning, serve as a visual display. This is a repeat page. It's saying the same thing, probably merged the last 2 slides.
So just a quick comment on the potential causes. I have found that when I do my Kappas now, I look at what the actual root cause was in that instance, and that becomes what drives the corrective action plan. I look at what could have been potential causes, and then that drives the preventive action plan. So a little bit of brainstorming to come up with the potential causes, something that I've found is useful.
I actually, because of the way the kappas are, so then you would open a preventive kappa, correct? Because you can't do preventive for an event that hasn't happened already. You only do preventive actions for something that hasn't occurred. So you're actually creating a section for that in your kappa.
Yeah, because preventive action is to prevent things that haven't occurred in the past. So if, for example, with the oil example, if one of them was the oil out of date, and one of them that was the oil was leaking, maybe the oil date didn't matter in this case, but it's still something that you could do to prevent problem from happening in the future.
Do you open a separate kappa for the potential, or do you build it into the same kappa?
I build it into the same kappa, and I just divide the root cause into here's all of my potential root cause. Here's what's actually the root cause in this case. And then that goes clearly to the corrective action plan. And then here's what potentially could have gone wrong. And that goes into the preventive action plan.
That's a new spin on it. I never considered doing that, because what I try to do, because people get so confused between corrective and preventive, I try to make them two kappas separate. This is the corrective kappa. This is the preventive kappa. And the reason is just because people really struggle with the concept of preventive action versus corrective action.
Agreed. Yeah. And so doing it in the format with two kappas is fine. It was more the concept that I wrapped my head around of this hasn't happened yet, but you're going to do something to prevent it from happening in the future was kind of where I got into that. Here's why you list all your root causes and how you divide them up.
I like it. I just try to, I like that, and I may try to implement that, but I may do two different ones, because I really struggle trying to keep people on the same page. They're always going, oh, I'm doing preventive. I'm like, nope, there's a non-conformance. It's not preventive.
Exactly. I can, if you want to reach out, I'm happy to show you how I've structured language around that, and you're welcome to borrow it.
Yeah, I would love to, because I mean, you can never have too many preventives.
You know how that makes Joey happy when I see people reaching out to one another. Right?
Aw, we've made his day.
I can see the smile.
I'm writing your name down so I don't forget. Okay. You know, when you're going through this, you're still going to be identifying the problem. We've already talked on this a lot. I'm just going to skip to the next one. The brainstorming session is identifying those possible causes. Someone who's, you know, have a mix of the team, get a fresh pair of eyes, someone who's not too close to the process. One of the things I like to do when I'm doing this big event, because this to me is I usually kind of do this approach when I have a really high risk kappa, because you're pulling a lot of hours and dollars into it. And what I like to do is bring somebody who's maybe not associated with any of the process, because they're the fresh eyes. They're the person not connected to it who won't have bias, right? And then a facilitator who's an impartial referee. I really try to be the impartial referee. If I don't think I can be, I'll bring somebody else in. I'm usually really good at it when it becomes becoming impartial, pretending like I'm not on anybody's side. Everyone is equal contributor. We leave the rank at the door. That's actually written on the board, because I've actually had scenarios where directors were in the meetings or VPs and they start blistering around and say, this is what it is. And I'm like, well, your rank is at the door. Everybody has equal footing here. And it's fast and it's serious. And so that's the other thing. During an investigation scenario, what I'll sometimes do is, if I find that there's a really quiet person in the room, I've actually found my quietest person in the room usually knows what the heck's going on. And so about the middle of, they usually know everything. And they're like, if I say anything, nobody's going to listen. So I'll start to, during this session, and I'll identify that person. And then I'll switch and make them the referee right in the middle. And they'll be like, and we'll get to the root cause way faster.
I totally agree with Nellie. Totally.
I'm actually the talker. So sometimes I'll usually if I'm a partner with somebody, like at my other companies, it would be usually me and one other Kappa person, they might have to remind me, because I'm very passionate about quality and I'm even more passionate about investigations and Kappas. So sometimes it's a tap on the shoulder. I'm like, oh yeah, shit, I'm supposed to do that. Offer incentives. A lot of people don't want to come to brainstorming. So I usually provide lunch or coffee or a nice, donut. Know when to stop. Hey, there's the biggest problem. Once you get into this, you get somebody like me who can go on forever. I usually make somebody a timekeeper. How long are we going to go in this session? And do we need to make another one? Recognize this is a snapshot. Sometimes you'll get new information after the meeting that could completely change your decision. Revisit the problem again. do a process mapping of everything you've collected, because it'll help you as a facilitator or the Kappa lead or mentor, when you're actually typing in everything that everybody's written up and you're organizing it in a visual representation, you'll get an aha moment. The light bulb will click, and sometimes it won't click in the meeting. And so it's good to transcribe it. Plus also it helps other people see the thought process of the team. When I first start, I give everybody Post-it notes, and everybody gets a different color so we can see their ideas, so we don't lose everybody's ideas.
Nellie, I wanted to say that it's good to publish those as much as possible, because I have found that sometimes they don't always have the right person in the brainstorming. So if other people read that, it pops something for them too.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Paige, it might be a good idea on this slide to add a note to that. Publish your minutes along the way. What I'll usually do is I'll do a wrap-up meeting, Jan, where the people who participated in the investing managers are there, and then that usually will say, oh shoot, we missed this one person, we need to talk to them. Again, I keep saying, don't meddle the causes with the solution, with the investigation. It's so easy to get focused on a cause and not going in the right direction. If ideas are not coming, start asking what if. Sometimes I ask what ifs about the most ridiculous thing that I know is not it, and then it's like breaking the ice. Fishbone diagrams, I love them. I think they're just beautiful. This is my second favorite investigation tool besides 5 Whys. You can replace it. Interesting little story. I worked at Varian, and we were they brought me in for a completely non-related quality issue. They were having problems paying employees and suppliers timely. And they're like, and I had given them a whole demonstration of process mapping. So I came in and we did a whole process map. You should have seen, I had 20 people in the room. It was the best experience ever. And we found out the root cause ended up being is the software application used to execute payroll and the software application for AP and for all the inventory and employees wasn't talking. That was the root cause. And it was an entire day session. And they went in and they had somebody write, some code that connected them and fixed the issue quickly. And it was just like one of those, and it was really kind of surreal because we did process mapping and then we brought the fishbone in where we put everything up. Review your brainstorming outputs, align, your major causes with your manpower, your major categories, excuse me. There's 6 recommended. I actually had an engineer going, well, none of these 6 fit what I need to do. And I'm like, then change them. Oh, I can do that? Yes, you can change them. It's really kind of cute, some of the things you experience along the way. Allocate causes, organize. This is that potential causes, Post-it notes under the fishbone diagram. So what I'll do is I'll have a big, huge whiteboard and I'll draw it out. And then everybody's posting things that what they think is wrong. And then we organize it. If a cause seems to fit more than one category, repeat it. If you have to, duplicate it, do that. But if you're duplicating everything, you need to go back to your problem statement. You may not have the right problem statement. You might have plotted twigs on the branch where you might have to extend it out. There's, I usually take this level of effort when I'm going into a high-risk Kappa that has a huge impact on customer safety, potentially recalls, or huge costs to the business. And then here's the thing is now once you get all your causes all organized visually and everybody can see them, now you need to go challenge the why not. Why is this not part of the root cause? And you're going to go through each one and everybody's going to vote and everybody's going to talk about it. And it's that whole group think that you're going through. Look for repeated causes. You're going to gather check sheets. If you're really you might be doing a spaghetti chart. You might be processing. You may even do a survey. I've actually done a survey before. Once you've got, a small number of main causes, you can start to pair them up and keep narrowing it down until you get to root cause. And I've actually, when you have a huge problem, I've actually had there be 3 root causes, because when you actually looked at it, it was 3 different processes connecting that weren't functioning enough to where that they could flow through to each other. The number 1 cause that I have with Kappas is the process is inadequate and ineffective because one system is not flowing into the other. The inputs and the outputs are not connecting. And then here's where people forget. Test the most likely cause. Test it, because they all think they get the root cause. They go spend months implementing it. And then when they go to verification, it fails. Do a pilot run. Don't waste the time and money. And if you have a war room, you can have the diagrams posted so people are walking by. And, and sometimes you'll get somebody walking by. I had one instance where I had a huge process map up for an issue. It was part of a recall, and we worked day and night. You know how recalls are, right? And we had the map posted in the conference room, and one of the operators walks by, and she's reading it, and she points out, hey, we don't document that. And it was like the most important part of an LHR that anybody should capture. But because she was just curious, we found out, the root causes, we're not even documenting this element that's really important to the process that was causing the nonconformance, and that we would have missed it altogether if we hadn't had it displayed. If you have to do multiple fishbones, do them. There's no limit. So I'm going to go into sources of variation. I find that this helps when I'm brainstorming with a big team. That kind of gets everybody thinking, the gears all going. Are we good for time? We are. We're kicking butt, Paige. Whew. I guess I need to add more slides. No. Does the person have adequate supervision and support? Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times management has no idea what's going on with something, or a supervisor. Does the person know what he's expected to do in his job? How much experience does the person have? Does the person have the proper motivation to do his best work? Is the person satisfied or dissatisfied with his job? Is the person more or less productive at certain times of the day? Does physical conditions such as light or temperature affect their work? Does the person have the tools and equipment needed to do the job? Who does the person contact when problems arise? Is the workload reasonable? These are really nice for when you're looking at the manpower piece of any investigation. The number one root cause with manpower, to be honest with you, is the procedure is inadequate, they're not trained. I can't tell you how many companies don't have an effective training program that rolls things out and that people understand them. The other thing is they don't have the tools they need. Because in the events of not having a tool, man will go build one themselves. And usually if you leave it to people to build it themselves, they don't think of the consequences. It's only because it's made themselves effective. That's it. Here's just some question. Is the procedure adequate to reflect the current method? Oh my God, how many times the method has changed and nobody updated the procedure? It happens all the time. It drives me crazy. Is the method regularly reviewed for adequacy? Is the method used affected by external factors? That's the inputs and outputs of things. And an external factor that people don't consider is the equipment software. Sometimes that can cause a huge nonconformance, and it's a configuration that's 30 seconds fixed. It's the simple things. It's never very complicated. It's usually pretty simple. It's the investigation that's complicated. Have other methods been considered? How does the operator know if a method is operating effectively? The statistics, I can never say statistical analysis. There we go. Used to verify effectiveness of the method. What adjustments must the operator make during the process? Have any changes been made recently? When I'm looking at method, the best thing I tell any person doing an investigation is go watch the process. Go watch the process. Go watch the process 2 or 3 times. Watch the process with 1 operator, with 2 operators, 3 operators. It's so important because if you don't do it, you're going to not get root cause. That visual tour is so important.
I don't know how many more slides you have, but I'll say that this doesn't seem so intimidating anymore. It just sounds like go talk to people, have a conversation, learn what happened, document it. Don't do the bad things again. It sounds pretty intuitive.
It is. And once people go through, like any new person I bring into Kappa, I usually take them through this slide deck and my Kappa slide deck. And the reason I do that is because by the time they're done with it, they feel inspired, I hope. I hope I'm energizing. And they'll go and they'll uncover something and they get very excited. Oh my God, I found this. And they'll be so proud of themselves. And that's about 8 out of 10 times. There's still the 2 people who just really, really don't. They hate Kappa. You can't change their mind.
Don't worry about them.
Machine. Some questions. How old is the machine or equipment? Is it maintained? Oh my God. Most equipment issues are maintenance or not validating the equipment. That's it. I've never seen any other issue with machinery because do you have a maintenance program? Is it validated? Those are top ones.
I did have one time though, where the equipment just went out of calibration and nobody knew to look at that. I just recognized something wasn't right and I went and used another piece of machinery that was still within calibration and got an answer that made much more sense. So we went back and tested the other one and it just went kaputty. So that does happen.
No, that does happen. And to me, that still falls under that, maintenance piece of it, because you should have something that verifies the maintenance. And if people think something, it's that employee awareness, which I build into my GMP. If something isn't working like it's usually working, something's usually wrong. Escalate it to your supervisor. How does the operator know if the machine is operating correctly? That's what gets into your point, Jan. You wouldn't have found that if it wasn't there. How is the capability of the machine been validated? What adjustments must the operator make during the process? There was a company I was working with, and the equipment was really complicated, and so they didn't qualify the employees on how to make the changes in the equipment. And they kept wondering why, and they kept retraining their employee. And then when you looked at it, I'm like, but you didn't teach them this. You're missing this teaching component. And once we figured that out and we wrote work instruction, it was no problem anymore. Another thing that happens with equipment a lot is changes get made and nobody's aware of them. Somebody just comes out on the line and makes a change. And then they're like, why is it not functioning the way it's supposed to? I know, Jan. Yes, I've had that happen.
Oh, no. I usually try and take all knobs and switches off of machinery. So
yep, me too.
Can't do it.
The questions I have here are because I've had a Kappa linked with every single one of these questions. And they're the most common issues I've had. Material, ingredients. How is the material produced? How is material verified? How old is the material? How is quality determined prior to operation, aka inspection? What is the level of quality? Material packaged. How is it packaged? Can temperature, light, humidity affect the material? Oh my God, I had a Kappa. Early ones, one of my very first ones. I'm going to tell you, it was from Abbott. We had a process we did in Morgan Hill. They moved the process to another location that had a lot of heat and humidity, and we were having issues. We had recalls. It was just terrible, and nobody could figure it out. And so I started doing my investigation, and then I uncovered that the product sits on the pier for 2 days prior to shipment in 100-degree weather with high humidity. And well, ESD problems occur with those types of situations. And so, but if I hadn't done the asking along the way, nobody would have ever found that out. Who's the material supplier? Sometimes you can have a bad supplier. And has the supplier changed the process? Environment, what are the conditions monitored, the controls measured, equipment calibrated, HVAC systems, they need to be calibrated, they need to be maintained, they need, IQ, OQ, which is installation operational process qualification for those who don't know the acronym. How does the environment change the process, impact on the process, and how does it change the material? That goes into that example where I gave you where somebody, parts were sitting on the pier for 2 days. Measurement systems. How frequent are products inspected? How is measuring equipment calibrated? You're going to start to see connections now. This is what you're going to start to see, and that's really what I want my inspectors to see is, are they using the same tools and equipment? How are the results recorded? Sometimes it can be how the results are recorded. I actually had an inspection form, and the way they were doing the inspection form, they didn't realize they were mixing the information, and so we rewrote the inspection form, and that fixed the error, believe it or not. Is everybody following the same standard? Is the inspection procedure very clear about your statistical sampling and how to do inspections? Do inspectors know how to use test equipment? That's another area that's I've had a lot of problems with. They bring a new test inspector, they throw in a piece of equipment, and they just expect them to know how to use it. Here's an example. I'm not going to go through everything. It's a visual representation of one, kind of bringing in everything generically that we've just talked about. And then I did one myself. This is an out of tolerance piece of equipment. And we found, no document process regarding OOT test equipment, so they didn't review it. OOT communication process with this vendor was inconsistent. So when I say vendor, I mean the calibration house would find something out of tolerance that didn't notify anybody. Service organization not aware that out of tolerance remediation was required to be documented. So your service people sometimes they have equipment in their cars that they're using to service, and they'll have an OOT and they'll fix it. And then they continue to use it, but maybe they didn't fix it effectively. And so I had that happen to me at a very large company where the service department was doing all the repairs in the field. And I'm seeing the grins a lot across the faces. It's like a lot of it's like, I've had that experience. Process mapping, another one of my favorite. I love process mapping. I just do. Another tool that's really awesome is going from A to Z.
All of these tools in one event?
Nope. You use them appropriately. So like, for example, if I have a low risk Kappa that's pretty simple, I might just do 5 whys. If I have a process that has 2 or 3 processes, I may do a fishbone diagram. If I have anything that usually has 3 to 5 processes, I'll usually do process mapping, because the process, you usually find that they're in silos and they're not talking to each other. So like I said, that's where I become your Kappa coach along the way.
I'm interested to know if Maren or Verna or Karen, do you also have all of these tools, and do you start with 5 whys, or do you have a preference? Is it uniform?
Personally, for me, I think 5 whys is the best tool to start off with, and then Ishikawa and FMEA effectively come afterwards. But 5 whys usually resolves the problems, in my opinion, in most cases.
I think 5 whys is a great way to start. It's really easy to understand, and it's easy for people to walk through. The fishbone and the other things become more valuable if you start finding that you've got 4 or 5 answers to those 5 why questions, and it starts kind of dividing out, and then having other tools to organize the information helps. But using the principles of 5 whys, even if you're doing the fishbone diagram, it just makes sense. It's a really good tool.
If I use any other process, I will use 5 whys to validate root cause of that investigation. So practically every Kappa has a 5 whys in it.
Yeah, I think 5 whys, for what everybody says, is for the layperson, from anyone who is technical or non-technical, 5 whys is easy for anybody to pick up. I use Ishikawa as well as a fault tree analysis, either one, because that's when you've got more branches and it's maybe the answer to one why is more than one answer. And so that's why you break it out. For process, I use it separately. Again, though, as Nellie said, you don't use all these tools for everything. You kind of pick the ones. If you've got a simple, straightforward Kappa, you don't need to document everything to the nth degree, but it's helpful for a process map separately. I use that actually in the beginning to help everybody understand the whole process of events surrounding the event, and also to basically pinpoint within a process, where do you think it happened, and make sure that everyone agrees about it. And so you go back to updating your process, your statement. It also helps you understand in a process flow map. You can, and the book that I put in the chat goes over this. It helps you understand what's within your control of your company and what is outside of the boundaries of your immediate control. You want to get all of your ducks in a row internally first before you start blaming a supplier on something. You want to make sure that if you do feel like it's a supplier issue, that you're able to collaborate with them by saying, we looked at everything internal, here's what we did. Then they say, okay, you've done your homework. You're not just coming to blame us for something.
Yeah. And I get that in packaging a lot. They always try and blame the package, where usually it's something in the production process or training or whatever, instead of the actual package.
Or insufficient design.
Yep. I actually like to use process mapping for preventive Kappas. When we've opened a preventive Kappa to improve a process, I want to get the biggest bang of my buck. So I'll process map it from A to Z from that point. And usually that gives us value on a preventive Kappa, because most companies don't want to. It's like, why am I going to spend money doing a Kappa that I don't want to? But all notified bodies expect 1 or 2, 3 or 4, preventive Kappas. So if we're going to do it, let's get some money on. Let's reduce a problem. I mean, I did one at Abbott it was an inventory thing. They were having problems with inventory management, and it wasn't really a QMS, but we did a whole preventive Kappa, and we actually found a lot of tiny quality issues we could fix along the way, but we also then from the business helped them fix their inventory process at the same time.
I will make a comment about the 5 whys, because we've been talking about it with Kappa here, but you can use 5 whys anytime you're looking at a problem in the company. So if you've got a design review, or you've got a design verification issue, or you have a supplier problem that's just developing, this take of asking the 5 whys helps you make better fixes at what I call the lower level listening posts in the company, because I think Kappa should be an escalation of issues, not that issues just necessarily come into Kappa. So if you do a good job of understanding the process and locating the problem area and all of that, when an issue is small, then that's Kappa prevention. So 5 whys is useful for that also.
So we actually have implemented what I call a process NCR. because with the new risk-based approach, I was talking with an ex-FDA auditor during training and rollout, and they're saying a company of 100 people should have less than 10 Kappas, because you should be putting what's the highest risk in your Kappas. But then I said, well, then how do you document the small nonconformances? And so we have a one-pager NCR where you can identify root cause, where we would use 5 whys, you would do correction, containment, and verification all on one form. And it's that simple, obvious stuff, but you get the credit for it. And and those are usually, you know, your 2 week and 30 day issues. So
I have to say, I had to use a process map on a Kappa I couldn't close to prove why I couldn't close it.
I had to do that too, Jan. That's, you know, there are the unclosable, right? I just want to take a time check. We are at 8:59. There's a total of 53 slides. I didn't expect to get through all of them. We're at slide 41. I can make a couple of corrections and send them out, and then people can feel free to ask me questions, or I can send them to Joe and he can distribute them with the meeting.
We can just put them in our weekly call, which is where people look for these things. And I'm getting some private notes. Thank you. This was great. I have to jump off. You can continue for a few minutes. We're recording. Okay. They can refer to it later, or you can say, here's the other process that I had in these last 10 pages, and just talk about it in general.
Well, let's finish. I can finish up probably in the next 10 minutes. That way they have the full recording, and then share it with everybody.
Works for me.
You know, the process map helps you look at the complete process. And when I mean the complete process, it's the inputs and the outputs. A lot of people go, oh, I have a process in my shipping area. They don't realize it can be the work order section, and it can be also customer service, because customer service isn't communicating. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at a process, you're looking at the inputs and the outputs of the whole process. And that's when we talk about a complete process. You also want to identify the critical stages of the process, because sometimes that's where the areas are. And then one of the things I like to do is I like to ask everybody, what is your biggest problem you're having right now before you start anything on process mapping? What's your biggest problem? And usually everybody will complain, and I put that in the parking lot, and we see if those come out during the process mapping. Show the relationship between the different steps, and we identify and eliminate waste. That's another thing where quality can provide value when you're process mapping. Flow charts or process map helps you understand and improve a process by enabling you to look for opportunities for improvement, gap between reality and the ideal. It's funny what the operator thinks is going on and what the VP thinks is going on in the area. Identify where defects are found, where they introduced. Identify where measurements need to be put in place. See where rework and bottlenecks occur. And then elimination of non-value added to activities waste. One of the things I find happens over time, and I call it the Kappa creep, is you have an issue with an area and everybody's issued like 1, 2, 3, 5 Kappas in the area, and you've layered it. You're doing the same thing 5 times in different areas. And therefore you've increased your labor costs because you're doing it 5 times, but you still haven't fixed the issue. So sometimes by looking at it and going, okay, wait a minute, we've done this 5 different areas, we're still not fixing it. Where's the right area, and what do we need to put in there to prevent it from being a problem in that one space? Consider when flow charting, a process map. What level of detail is required? What is critical to quality? What's non-critical to quality activities? What are the measurable outputs? Know when to stop, because with process mapping, you can go on and on and on forever. That's where I talk about, bracket it to inputs and outputs of the process. Space, time allows, what's the best time of the day or the week to do it for everybody. I usually find between 10 and 3, usually Wednesdays and Thursdays is when you get the best amount of participation, is my ideal. But then I've had people who are night owls, and I've done Kappa, or I've done investigations at 7 o'clock at night. You want to make sure you define the group dynamics, and Post-it notes are your friend. How do I do it? So here's a basic template of the process. Here's your process in the middle, and here's your suppliers and inputs, and here's your outputs and your customer. And basically you what I tell people to do is get that really large poster paper that can stick on walls, because you're going to want to take this with you. If you put it on a whiteboard, somebody's going to have to erase it at some point. And then you can move things around. So everybody puts what their thoughts are on a little 3x3 piece of Post-it note. They all have their own colors, so they recognize their input. And then we just let everybody loose for 20, 30 minutes, and they all put everything up on these dedicated, like you would have a Post-it for supplier, or a huge poster board for supplier inputs, and then everybody just starts putting their thoughts on there. And then once you gather everybody's thoughts, you start to go through what level of detail, and you might start putting things on parking lots. So you start to review everybody's inputs. Has something changed? Do we want to go this detail? If yes, if not, then you'll start to remove things or you'll add things at the second phase. And then the next part of it is you're going to take those Post-it notes and you're going to start to actually map them out and start, putting them in logical order with lines and arrows. And you're going to start to basically build a flow chart on your Post-it board. You're going to identify where defects occur. You'll start to write symbols, where defects are reduced, where measurements need to be taken. And you might do a time analysis. You might do a cost analysis. Use a process map to do a physical layout. Spaghetti charts. I love spaghetti charts. I did a spaghetti chart. No shit. But excuse me, I said the wrong word. I had a internal audit process, and the director goes, "Why does it take so long to approve everything through the internal audit process?" It was 3 forms. And I said, "I don't know, let me look at it." So I did a process map of the whole thing. I started from the beginning to the end, and I looked at it and I came in and I go, well, the VP of quality signs a total of 50 times on the process form. He goes, "You're kidding me." I'm like, "No, I'm not." They signed the initiation, they signed with this, and he counted it. And we just realized that, and the reason the signature was important is because it sits on that VP's desk for a very long time to get that approval. So that's what was leading to it. It was just that review process. So we streamlined that process. But that's an example where I used process mapping to do it. And I never would have realized that it was sitting on the VP's desk for a long time if I hadn't counted all the signatures as part of my spaghetti map. We're at the end almost. So, summary of the tools, there are many investigational tools. There are no wrong tool to use. The purpose of investigation is to help you determine the root cause. So as long as you get to root cause, it really doesn't matter what you use. And then the report. You want to document your results. What matters, the facts are organized in a usable and readable form. Suggestions: start with a summary written towards a 7th grade level and then include technical support below the bullet formats. One of the things is everybody thinks the report has to be a PhD. Well, then when you're sitting in front of an auditor and you're trying to glean off what you did 5 years ago or 2 years ago, you don't remember it. So I say write the first part in very simple, so that when you're reading it a couple years later, you remember what happened, and then put all your technical aspect behind it. Put data and results tables if appropriate. Attach sample records. Sometimes you don't remember why the event ever occurred, so make sure that's attached to your report. Example of a test result, the range results for the test method were incorrect. That's that nice simple. And then here's the facts. Here's the document number, the step, and what it should be. Here's your investigation report. Is clear and easy to understand problem statements, sufficient information and data, containment actions. A lot of people will forget it. Corrections that have already occurred, investigation activities, a root cause summary and conclusion. Because a lot of individuals will do a whole root cause. It's beautiful, but then you don't want to make the auditor read the entire root cause. You want to have a nice big old summary of where you ended up, what you planned for corrective action and preventive action, evidence supporting the investigation, ensuring that information related to the quality problem or non-conforming product is disseminated to those directly responsible. It's that communication to the organization. Because Kappa isn't a vacuum, you want to communicate everything that happened in any root cause investigation. And you want to make sure it makes sense. At the end of the day, write it all up and then say, does it even make sense? Can I read it straight through without getting stuck? And I think this is just a regurgitation of what we talked about already. It's just here again. At the end of the day, your report should be standalone, no explanation required. I should be able to hand the report to an auditor. They can read it and go, oh, I'm at the same page. That's the good test of a good investigation. And that's it. Any questions? I mean, do we still have?
I think so. You were great in addressing them as we went along, and I liked very much the panel of quality experts that chimed in during the presentation. I think the thing that strikes me the most is it seems intuitive, and before it seemed intimidating.
That is usually the key position that a lot of people will take. Once you've gone through it and you become what I call a Kappa expert, you'll actually start using investigations and root cause analysis in your everyday. I mean, I've done it at work. I've done it at home. I mean, Paige, before she knew what Kappa was, when I started teaching about Kappa, she goes, oh my God, you do this all the time.
It becomes. This
And
dish is broken. Why is it broken? Because somebody dropped it. Why did somebody drop it?
It's very effective, and you can use it anywhere. And it teaches you just a different frame of mind and thought process.
I actually did an unofficial Kappa with my fraternity in college and didn't realize I was doing it until I came and talked to Nellie, and then went,
And what was the root cause of the fraternity?
Communication mostly between different sectors of the fraternity.
Mhm.
Getting through, we were community service based, so some project of ours weren't being completed correctly.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay. Life applications. I like that. Next week, we have Treya, who's going to talk to us about her medical device. And I encourage as many experts in as many disciplines as possible to come, because she wants our collective minds to help her get to market faster, cheaper, and better than she could on her own, which is why we're all here. So, Nellie, thank you for today, and I'll see you all next week.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, guys.